Hey guys, look back on Sean's channel. Today I'm bringing you guys a new deck profile. This is my Lightsworn deck. I'll be honest, this isn't the most competitive deck that I've ever built. This isn't going to be the most top tier meta defining deck to format or anything like that. I just really like Lightsworn and I want to experiment with the deck a little bit. So I put this together as a bit of fun. That's why I'm sharing it with you guys today. So without further ado, let's just get into it. This is Lightsworn. Starting things off, we run 3 copies of Weiss Lightsworn Archfiend. Honestly, Weiss was a fantastic bit of support that Lightsworn really needed from Legacy of Destruction. One of my main gripes with Lightsworn was the fact that you actually ran a lot of bricks such as your Wulf or your Felis, but Weiss is a very good card that's able to turn those bricks into an actual part of the combo. So Weiss has the effect in hand that you can place one other Lightsworn card from your hand on the top of your deck to special summon this card from your hand. Then you can send top 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard. So this is really good if you're using Weiss in collaboration with the likes of Wulf. So if you have Wulf in your hand, you activate Weiss. What you're able to do is put Wulf to the top of your deck, special summon Weiss, then you're going to mill the top 2. Part of that top 2 cards is going to be the Wulf that you just put at the top. Therefore, Wulf's effect will just pop off, that you're able to special summon it out from the graveyard. So it's a really great synergy there in order to get some of those bricks that are in your hand out onto the field to perform their functions. But that's not all Weiss can do. Of course, he's a Lightsworn monster, so he has a graveyard ability too. That if this card is sent from the deck to the graveyard, you can target one Lightsworn monster in your graveyard except for Weiss Lightsworn Archfiend and special summon it. This can be very good because we do run a few different names of Lightsworns in the deck, such as our Archer or Wulf or Dragonling as well. So it's not unlikely that we won't have a target. I definitely think it's important to maximize 3 copies of Weiss. It really helps the deck unbrick itself. I can't stress the importance of this card enough. 3 copies, absolutely essential. We also have 3 copies of Lightsworn Dragonling. Another great bit of support from the same set as Weiss. Dragonling has the effect that if a Lightsworn monster is in your graveyard, you can actually special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is special summoned, you can send one Lightsworn card from the deck to the graveyard, except for Dragonling. This is just really powerful. Not only does it offer a free body if you have a Lightsworn in the graveyard, but also the fact that you're able to send a Lightsworn monster from the deck to the grave is really good at bringing out your Wulf or your Felis, depending on if you want to go for some synchro plays or for some rank plays. But that's not all Dragonling can do. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one Dragon monster with 3000 attack and 2600 defense from your deck to your hand, which of course opens us up that we can either add Punishment Dragon or Judgment Dragon from our deck to our hand, which is really good to get in rotation so we don't end up milling it. So I think Dragonling is very important to run at 3 copies in this deck. I run 2 copies of Wulf and 2 copies of Felis. These were the bricks that I was telling you about that makes Weiss so essential to run at 3 copies. Just because with Wulf and Felis, they cannot be normal summoned or set. They must be special summoned if they're sent from the deck to the graveyard. So we really don't want to open these unless we have Weiss going hand in hand with it. But considering that this is a Lightsworn build, a lot of the time you're going to be milling a bunch and stuff like that, and you want to have as many Lightsworn names as possible in order to make your Judgment Dragon or Punishment Dragon live. So I still think it's very important to run these guys. I would only be running it at these ratios though, just because we have a few different engines in here too, so I didn't want to overload it with a bunch of bricks. So that's the ratio I definitely recommend to run both Felis and Wulf at. Next up, 1 copy of Punishment Dragon and 1 copy of Judgment Dragon. Judgment Dragon of course is like the OG Lightsworn boss monster. It cannot be normal summoned set and must be special summoned from your hand by having 4 or more Lightsworn monsters with different names in your graveyard, which of course you guys might think that might be really hard to get them out because we only run 4 Lightsworn monsters with different names in the main deck. But there are 2 more Lightsworn monsters in the extra deck, so you can actually find yourself bringing out Judgment Dragon more easily than one would think. He can also be searched off of Dragonling as well, so of course that's some really good ways to get him into your hand as quick as possible. Not only is he good because he has some good attack stats, but also he has the effect that you can pay 1000 life points and destroy all other cards on the field, which is just a fantastic board wipe that can get rid of monsters that can't be targeted, so I definitely think it's really worth it having him in the deck. Also during the end phase you can send top 4 cards from the deck to the graveyard. Again, this is Lightsworn, so we're going to be milling a lot, and this could be good at setting up our graveyard for some other great plays. Punishment Dragon is similar yet it's opposite as well, because this card can only be special summoned by having 4 or more banished Lightsworn monsters with different names. So rather than having them in the graveyard if they get banished, Punishment Dragon is definitely really good for that. If you're going against a deck that banishes a bunch of stuff from the graveyard, and you have a choice between searching out Punishment or Judgment off a Dragonling, then if it's going against a banishing deck, Punishment would be the way to go. But I also like running both these names because of Enlightenment Dragon too. Punishment Dragon has a quick effect that you can pay 1000 life points and shuffle into the decks all cards in the graveyards and all face up banished cards. except for Lightsworn monsters. This can be really good and can be really crippling to your opponent, especially if they're playing a deck that heavily relies on the graveyard and they've spent so much time and resources investing into their graveyard that you're able to just activate Punishment Dragon and just completely ruin all their progress and shuffling all the stuff back into their deck. I think is a really underrated effect, so I think Punishment Dragon is very good for that. And finally, Punishment Dragon has a similar mill 4 effect, but much like all the other Dark Lightsworn monsters, it's only if one of your Lightsworn monster effects is activated you can mill the top 4 cards from your deck to the graveyard. I'm sure if someone was making this deck a lot more competitive, they might cut out one or the other depending. But again, I like this deck as a bit of fun, so I want to get as out there as much as I possibly can. So I personally have a lot of fun playing both these guys in the deck. Going into our Horus engine now, we run 3 copies of Imsety, Glory of the Horus. For those of you who don't know, pretty much all the Horus monsters, they're level 8 monsters that all have inheritance summons from the graveyard. That if you control King Sarcophagus, you can special summon this card from the graveyard and onto the field. This is really good for some rank plays because we do play a lot of rank 8 monsters that synergize well with this deck. But I definitely think Imsety is definitely the best Horus monster because he actually has the effect that can search your King Sarcophagus to really get your plays going. This effect reads that you can send 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard, including this card, and add 1 King Sarcophagus from your deck to your hand. And then you can draw 1 card, which is just absolutely great to get King Sarcophagus as quickly as you possibly can, because King Sarcophagus can also set up our graveyard for some Lightsworn plays too. So I definitely recommend running 3 copies of Imsety, but alongside it I recommend playing 1 copy of Hapi and 1 copy of Blessing as well, and that will be the monster side of our Horus package right there. So I definitely recommend you guys run it at that ratio. Small little Bystial package as well. We run 3 copies of the Bystial Lubellion. Bystial Lubellion I find to be really good because it can search out any of your Bystial monsters. But not only that, it's able to set up Branded Regained onto the field as quickly as possible, which I think is just a really important card for the strategy. Considering that we mill a lot and we also banish, we are at risk of like completely decking out, and we don't really want to lose that way. So having Bystial Lubellion as a way to get Branded Regained onto the field is a really good way of us to recycle resources as well. So I definitely recommend you guys run 3 copies of the Bystial Lubellion. We also run 1 copy of Magnamhut, 1 copy of Druiswurm, and 1 copy of Baldrake. I just think Bystials are too good to pass up on. They all have very powerful effects. And not only that, Magnamhut is really good because it can actually search you your Lightsworn Dragonling, or it can even search you your Punishment Dragon or your Judgment Dragon. But also the fact that you can banish some of your Lightsworn monsters to get your Bystial monsters onto the field is really good at also setting up your Punishment Dragon too. So there's a lot of ways these engines kind of mesh well together if you're really thinking about it. So I definitely think it's good to run at this ratio as well. And the fact that any of these can be searched off of the Bystial Lubellion I think is just really good. So I definitely recommend you guys run it at that ratio. I think it's very good for the deck. We also run the Shufflers, Mudora, the Sword Oracle, and Keldo, the Sacred Protector. Not only are these good interruptions if your opponent has some graveyard effects that you're able to shuffle cards in their graveyard back into the deck, but also again this is Lightsworn, so we're going to be milling a lot. So it's a good way to stop us from decking out as well. So 1 copy each is all you can play it at, of course, because they're both limited, but definitely they're still worth running. Again, I like to have a little bit of fun with this deck, so I try to be a little more unorthodox with it. And when I originally got into Lightsworn, I was playing Chaos Lightsworn, and I had so much fun playing that until it got absolutely annihilated by the ban list with Chaos Rule being banned and Chaos Space going to 1. But I think Chaos Emperor, the Dragon of Armageddon, is a nice return to form for me personally, so I really like Hapi in the deck. I'll admit, he's not even a particularly good card, but I just have so much fun playing it. If you guys want to cut him, that's absolutely fine, but I definitely think he's worth the run at 1. Going on to the spells now, 3 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade. This is a fantastic card, especially since it's an old card. It's not once per turn, so if you have 3 of these in your opening hand, you're able to activate 3 of these if you want. Charge Light Brigade simply reads that you can send the top 3 cards from the deck to the graveyard, then you can add 1 level 4 or lower Lightsworn monster from the deck to your hand. Funnily enough, since the introduction to Weiss, I actually sometimes find myself using Charge the Light Brigade to actually search Felis and Wulf, which are cards you would almost never search off of Charge of Light Brigade before. But considering that Weiss needs another Lightsworn monster in your hand in order to actually pop off its effect, means that it's more important than ever to run Charge of Light Brigade at 3 copies in this deck. It's great because it mills, and it's great because it searches. Definitely recommend running it at 3 copies. We run 3 copies of King Sarcophagus. I run it at 3 because I really don't want to mill it, which can be a danger in this deck. This is just to make all of our Horus monsters live in the graveyard, because when King Sarcophagus is face up on the field, all your Horus monsters in grave have an inherit summon effect that are able to special summon themselves out from the graveyard. Not only is it good for that, in fact you can search this off of Imsety, but also King Sarcophagus is just a really good way of setting up your graveyard as well, because it has the effect you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard and then send 1 Horus monster from the deck to the graveyard. and you can activate this effect up to 4 times per turn, which is just absolutely insane. So we really want to load up our graveyard with everything we have in our hand and get all the Horus stuff in rotation as quickly as possible. King Sarcophagus is just an absolutely insane card, so I definitely recommend you guys running it at 3 copies in this deck. It is really good. Because the Horus engine is really good in this deck, I also run 3 copies of Walls of the Imperial Tomb as well. This card's name becomes King Sarcophagus while it's in the field zone, so it's a great way of keeping your Horus monsters live. It also has the effect that during the main phase you can add 1 Horus monster from your deck to your hand, and then you can place 1 card from your hand to the bottom of the deck. So if you don't open up your Imsety Glory to Horus, Walls of the Imperial Tomb is a very good way to get to that as quickly as possible. So I definitely recommend you guys running out 3 copies in this deck. I run 1 copy of Chaos Space. There are a lot of monsters that cannot be normal summoned or set that we run in this deck, such as your Wulf, your Felis, Emperor Dragon, Judgment Dragon, or even Punishment Dragon. So Chaos Space is just a really good way for us to search them out, which is great, but I mostly use this for a secondary effect, which I think is just really good. So you can banish this card from the graveyard and target one of your banished light or dark monsters that cannot be normal summoned or set, and place that monster on the bottom of your deck, and then you can draw 1 card. This is just a really good way of kind of like getting your boss monsters back in rotation if our opponent's able to get rid of them and we're kind of in a jam, because as soon as stuff gets banished in this deck, it's really hard to get them back. So Chaos Space is just one way that you can do it. So I definitely recommend you guys running out 1 copy in this deck. 1 copy of Branded Regained. Like I said, you can set this up because we run the Bystial Lubellion in this deck, so it's very easy to get Branded Regained onto the field as quickly as possible. And its effect is really good at not letting us deck out, because it reads that if a light or dark monster is banished, you can target one of those monsters and place that monster in the bottom of the deck, and if you do, you can draw 1 card. This doesn't only go for our monsters, but also if your opponent has light or dark monsters that are banished, you can put those at the bottom of their deck and you can just draw a card. So it's a good way to kind of like dig deeper into the deck, as well as not letting yourself getting decked out either. So I definitely recommend you guys running Branded Regained at 1 copy in this deck. 1 copy of Foolish Burial, because this is a Lightsworn deck, so if we were wrong if you weren't running Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial means you can just send 1 monster from the deck to the graveyard. This can be your Wulf or your Felis if you want bodies on the field as quickly as possible. Even your Weiss if you want to revive a guy, or Dragonling if you want to search one of your bigger dragons. But the possibilities are so vast in this deck that you can even send some horror stuff as well if you wanted to. So I definitely recommend running Foolish Burial at 1 copy in this deck. Also recommend 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. We don't have a lot of interruption in this deck, so I wanted to add some, and I think Droplet is definitely one of the best ones. Not only because it's really powerful at negating a bunch of your opponent's monster effects at once, but also the fact that we're able to kind of like load up our graveyard as well with Droplet. So I definitely think it's really important to run it at 3 copies in this deck. And finally, round us off, 1 copy of Lightsworn Aegis. It's a trapped card that simply reads, you can target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of Lightsworn monsters you control and negate their effects until the end of this turn. But if this card is sent from deck to the graveyard, you can set this card, and you can only use each effect of Lightsworn Aegis once per turn. I find this to be really good because a lot of the time we do have Lightsworn monsters on the field in order to make this card live. If it's not our main deck monsters, it's the extra deck monsters such as the Minervas or whatever. So this card can be live quite a lot, and since it's not restricting itself to like monsters or spells or traps, it's just being able to negate face-up cards. I find it to be really good. So I definitely recommend you guys running out 1 copy to round off the deck. Going to the next deck now, I run 1 copy of Enlightenment Dragon. Again, if you want to make this deck really competitive, I probably wouldn't be running this card, but considering that this is still just a little bit of fun, and I run both the Judgment Dragon and Punishment Dragon anyways, I figured why not run Enlightenment Dragon. I mostly just think it's a really funny card if you're able to bring it out. Just because if you're able to bring it out, it is actually pretty impressive. Because he must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing Judgment Dragon and Punishment Dragon, 1 each from your field and graveyard. So it takes a lot of setup just to get this guy out. Now once per turn you can quick effect, pay 2,000 life points and banish all other cards on the field and in the graveyard. And also once per turn during the end phase, you can send top 4 cards from your deck to the graveyard. But not only that, if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can add 2 of your banished monsters to your hand, 1 Judgment Dragon and 1 Punishment Dragon, and then you can special summon both, ignoring the summoning conditions. So as you can see, this card takes a lot of setup in order to actually get it out onto the field. It can be incredibly hard to actually bring him out, but if you do, it is really impressive and really funny. And considering that we're not taking this deck too seriously, I definitely think it's worth a shot. If for no nothing but just a little bit of fun. So 1 copy of Enlightenment Dragon. Also run a copy of Garura and Mudragon the Swamp. So these are super poly targets. We actually have super poly in our side deck, which I think is just a very good unexpected surprise that could really throw off your opponent, because super poly is definitely not a common card you'll see in Lightsworn builds. So if we're in a position where we have to go second, I like to side deck in super poly and use my opponent's monsters to go for either one of these cards. So I definitely think that it's worth running, but keep in mind you need to have super poly in the side deck. 1 copy of Minerva the Athenian Lightsworn. It's a generic level 8 synchro monster, but if this card is synchro summoned using Lightsworn monsters, you can send a Lightsworn monster with different types from your deck to the graveyard up to the number used for its synchro summon, which quite often would be 2 monsters, so it's a good way to like load up your graveyard as quickly as possible. Minerva is really good for that. But not only that, she has a few other effects as well. She has a very good protection effect that Lightsworn monsters you control cannot be banished by card effects, and also she has the effect that you can banish up to 4 Lightsworn monsters from the graveyard and send that many cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard. So not only is that good at setting up your punishment dragon, but it's also good to mill as much as you can too. So Minerva the Athenian Lightsworn is definitely worth running at 1 copy in this deck. 1 copy of PSY-Framelord Omega. Omega is really good because it can actually serve as a hand rip, and especially if you're running it alongside cards that are able to kind of like recycle Omega out over again, you're able to rip 2 cards out of your opponent's hands with the right setup. And considering how easy it is for us to get synchro 8 monsters out, I really just wanted to have another very powerful level 8 synchro to run alongside Minerva, so I definitely think Omega is a worthy contender for that spot. Not only for that reason, but also because we run the Bystial Dis Pater, so he has really great synergy with Omega. If you guys seen my Synchron combos, you'd know why. It's just because Omega and Dis Pater are able to do a hand rip of 2, because the Bystial Dis Pater has the effect that you can target 1 banished light or dark monster and special summon to your field. So if you have both these cards onto the field and then you activate Omega, Omega banishes itself and rips a card out of your opponent's hand, you can use Dis Pater's effect, bring back the Omega, and then Omega can use this effect again to rip another card out of your opponent's hand. So it's very good at setting up your opponent to have like a disadvantage right away. But not only that, Dis Pater also has a very good effect that when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can quick effect, target 1 banished card and shuffle it into the deck, and then if you shuffle it into your deck, you can destroy that monster, or if you shuffle it into your opponent's deck, you can negate the activated effect. So it's just a good little bit of interruption and a good way for us to recycle our monsters too. So I definitely think Dis Pater is worth running a 1 copy in this deck. Also run 1 copy of Chaos Angel. So one thing I forgot to mention about Dis Pater is that you need a Bystial in order to go into him, because it needs a dragon monster and 1 tuner in order to go into it. And most often when you're in a position where you have a Bystial on the field and you want to synchro, Dis Pater is the way to go. But also Chaos Angel can be a good choice as well. Chaos Angel is a synchro 10, so you need one of your level 4 Lightsworn monsters and one of your Bystials in order to go into it, which is absolutely fine, because for the synchro summon of this monster, you can treat 1 light or dark monster you control as a tuner in order to go into it, which is just really good, really opens up Chaos Angel to a lot of different strategies. And if this card is special summoned, you can target 1 card in the field and banish it, which is just really good. But not only that, this card gains the effects based on the original attributes used for material for this guy's synchro summon. So most likely you're going to be using a Bystial and a Lightsworn monster to go into him, so most likely you do have both these effects online. So if you're using a light monster to go into him, synchro monsters you control are unaffected by monster effects activated by your opponent, which is a good little protection for itself. But also, if a dark monster is used for its synchro summon, monsters you control cannot be destroyed with battle, which is just absolutely insane. I think Chaos Angel is a very good card to run. In some situations, you need to consider whether Dis Pater or Chaos Angel is better to go into. I think if we're going first, Dis Pater is the obvious choice, but if we're going second, Chaos Angel is the real way to go. So definitely 1 copy of it in the extra deck. Going into XZs now, 1 copy of Minerva the Exalted Lightsworn. So these 2 level 4 monster in order to go into it, so of course any of our Lightsworn main deck monsters pretty much. You can attach 1 material from this card and send top 3 cards from the deck to the graveyard, and then you can draw cards equal to the number of Lightsworn cards sent to the graveyard by this effect. I'll be honest, considering how little Lightsworn monster we actually run in the main deck, you probably won't be drawing a bunch off of this effect, but it is very good at just setting up your graveyard for some of your Horus plays and stuff like that. But Minerva is also good because if this card is destroyed by battle, or this card is in own possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can send the top 3 cards from the deck to the graveyard. Then you can destroy cards in the field up to the number of Lightsworn cards sent to the graveyard by this effect. So again, it is a good benefit if you do mill Lightsworn monsters, but even if you don't, it's good graveyard setup. I definitely think Minerva is really good to run that 1 copy. 1 copy of the Zombie Vampire. This is a great card to go into using the Horus engine because it is a generic rank 8 monster. Neither player can target this card with effects of special summoned monsters, except those special summoned from the graveyard. So it is quite hard to target this guy. But it has a really good effect that you can detach one material from this card, and then each player sends the top 4 cards from the deck to the graveyard. Then, if any monsters were sent to the graveyard by this effect, you can special summon one of those monsters to your field. This is absolutely insane because whatever you choose to bring out, those cards still go to the graveyard. So this is really good for graveyard setup and getting a body out on the field, whether that body be from your opponent's deck or your own. Also, if you're going first, it actually gives you insight into what your opponent is actually playing, so it might make you choose more wisely depending on how you want to proceed your turn. So I definitely think the zombie vampire is really important to run in this deck, so it definitely deserves a spot right here. I like to have a good board wipe in as well, so Garura's Eternity is definitely really good for that. Again, this is a monster you can go into using the Horus engine, and if this card is XZ summoned, you can destroy all other monsters on the field. Fantastic going second if your opponent has like a bunch of monsters that can't be targeted. If you're able to bring this guy out, it just completely wipes them out anyways, because that's a non-targeting destruction. But not only that, it also has a spell and trap card destruction as well, because you can detach one material from this card, then target one spell, just trap card on the field and destroy it, and if you do, this card gains 500 attack. So again, this is just a really good generic rank 8 monster. Good for a board wipe, but also good for spell and trap card destruction. I definitely recommend running it at 1. Also run 1 copy of Hope Harbinger and number 90 Galaxy Eyes Proton Lord. These are just good if you have like your Horus engine ready and then you know you're going first, because Hope Harbinger is a spell negate and Photon Lord is a monster negate. So if you're in a position where you want to set up as many negates as possible, you can choose between either a spell or a monster negate, so I think that's really important to have. So I definitely recommend you guys running one of each in the extra deck. Going into the links now, 1 copy of IP Masquerena. You guys all probably already know what this card does. I've pretty much seen this card in almost every deck. It's not a mystery of her effect anymore. She can basically link summon during your opponent's turn as a quick effect, and then when it resolves, that link monster, the user as material, cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So she of course is very good because she's able to go into cards like SP Little Knight, and SP Little Knight is just an absolutely insane card, especially if you're able to use IP in order to go into her. Because if SP Little Knight is link summoned using a monster from the extra deck as material, you can target 1 card on the field or in either graveyard and just banish it, which is just absolutely insane. But also when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can quick effect target 2 face-up monsters on the field, including a monster you control, and banish both of them until the end phase, which of course is just really good. SP Little Knight definitely deserves her spot in this deck. And then finally, round us off, Nightmare Unicorn, just for those cards that are really problematic to get rid of. Nightmare Unicorn is really good at getting rid of some tricky cards, because when it's link summoned, you can discard 1 card, then target 1 card in the field and return to the deck. So for cards that can't be destroyed, Nightmare Unicorn is a really good way to get around it. And honestly, sometimes Unicorn is a better monster to go into with IP Masquerena if you think SP Little Knight is not the play. So I think Unicorn is definitely really good to be running a 1 copy in this deck. Going into the side deck now, 3 copies of Lava Golem. I like to have some form of kaiju in pretty much all my extra decks no matter what. And honestly, there's no real strategy between picking Lava Golem over any of the other guys. There could be an argument made to go with the Dark Kaiju, but genuinely, I just think Lava Golem's a lot cooler because it's able to get rid of 2 monsters as opposed to just 1. So I definitely recommend running it at 3 copies in the side. I also run 3 copies of Artifact Lancia. Considering that Malice is probably going to be big this format, I think Lancia is a really good way of shutting it down. Lancia can be a bit of a double-edged sword, so be sure that you're activating this during your opponent's turn and not accidentally doing it during your own turn, because you do banish stuff as well. So make sure you're not interrupting any of your plays when you activate Lancia. Even the likes of Bystials, this can conflict with Bystials as well, so be sure to use your Bystials effects before you activate Lancia. But again, I'm not using this as an ultra competitive deck. This is just a bit of fun, but hopefully Lancia is a bit of inspiration for you to play it if you guys are trying to make this a bit more competitive. If I were trying to make this deck a bit more competitive, I still would use Lancia, just again because Malice is going to be really crazy this format, so I still think it's worth playing in this casual build as well. 3 copies of Super Polymerization. Again, we have 2 targets in the extra deck, and it can be a really good way of catching your opponent completely off guard. Fusion summoning is really rare in Lightsworn builds, so if you're able to flip up a card like Super Poly, it can completely annihilate your opponent and catch them completely off guard. I think it is a really good board breaker, and it can just fend off against a lot of decks. Also run 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. If we're stuck going second, Super Poly is very good, but if what your opponent is playing conflicts with the Super Poly targets, Dark Ruler No More is another way to kind of handle problematic monsters. and especially if you're running it alongside the final card in the extra deck, Evenly Matched. This little combo right here can win games completely on its own. So I definitely recommend rounding off the extra deck with 3 copies of Dark Blue No More and 3 copies of Evenly Matched. It's just a really, really lethal blowout that your opponent won't be able to combat. So that about does it for the deck. Please let me know what you guys think. Again, I know this isn't the most competitive deck in the world, and truth be told, it's not the most pure Lightsworn variant out there, but I still think this is a fun deck to try out. It can be a really good introduction to mill decks as well. I know if you want to get into mill decks, grass is back, so it's more desirable than ever to get into mill. This is definitely a more palatable mill strategy that I definitely recommend to you guys. So I recommend you guys give it a try and let me know what you guys think. Thank you for so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video because it really helps us out. And also if you guys can consider becoming a member as well, that's another way to directly support the channel. We want to give a special shout out to Mr. Kieran Thompson as well, who became our first member there recently. So we want to thank you personally for that support. We really appreciate it. And for any of you guys that want to try and build this deck, are looking for ways to buy cards in order to build it, we also have a TCG affiliate link in the description below. So by using that, you also help directly support the channel. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.